Hi, I'm Troy Deneen. I'm a cider maker with Blake's Hard Cider Company, and today I'm going to show you how to make hard cider in your own home. To start off, I'm going to talk to you about an apple selection. Cider makers generally use sharps and bitter sharps, which are a category of cider apples. Generally, you want a blend of those two, since sharps provide more of an acid content and bitter sharps produce more of a tannin content. So the better of a balance you can get between those two, the better of a product you will end up with. When you're choosing your blend between sharps and bitter sharps, normally the sugars aren't included in the category of your blend. Most blends will reach around 1.040 specific gravity and 1.060 specific gravity. Specific gravity just means how much sugar is in my solution. A specific gravity with 1.050 is going to have more sugar than a solution with 1.030. So for a more traditional cider, you're going to want a blend of bittersweet apples, which have more tannins, a blend of bitter sharp apples, which have more acidity, and sharp apples, which have the most acidity. No matter which blend of apples you choose, your cider is pretty much going to range from 5% to 8%. If you don't have access to pressing equipment, another option would be to buy apple cider or apple juice. What you want is pasteurized cider with no preservatives. A good example of that is Blake's soft cider. Regardless of the brand, make sure you choose a cider that has no sorbates or sulfites. Both will arrest fermentation. So after you've chosen which apples you're going to use, the next thing to choose is which fermentation vessel you're going to ferment in. Here we have a glass carboy and a food grade plastic bucket. Pros to the glass carboy are that it helps produce consistent batches and they're not easily scratched. Some cons are they let light in and they're easily breakable. Some pros to the 5-gallon food grade bucket are that it does not let light in, and sometimes they have this spigot on it, which helps racking, and we'll talk about that later. Some cons are that this top is not easily opened, and it sloshes around the liquid a little bit, and 2, they're easily scratched. So if you don't have the correct sponge, like this sponge, it's got a soft side and an abrasive side, you could scratch the inside, and any scratch in there could become a home for bacteria. The next thing we'll talk about is your cleaning equipment. You want a detergent or a caustic. Here we have 5-star PBW. I love this. It's easy to use. The only problem is your water has to be between 100 and 160 degrees. Anything less than that is not going to clean your equipment the way you want. You need to rinse that out with hot water again. And the third step would be your sanitizer. This is Star San acid sanitizer. They produce rinse and non-rinse. If you want to use either, that's completely fine. Both will help you out immensely. You don't want to touch these chemicals, so you're going to need a pair of gloves that are disposable, or scoopers like these to help you measure out. Now that we've talked about your apple selection, your vessel selection, and your cleaning supplies, we're going to talk about the items you need to complete a successful fermentation. Before adding your yeast, you need to measure how much sugar is in your liquid. This is called a hydrometer and a hydrometer cylinder. Simply add your cider into the hydrometer cylinder, drop in your hydrometer, and the level that it floats at will tell you exactly what your specific gravity is. A lot of people swear by Fermentus Safe Cider yeast. It's a dry yeast, so you'll have to rehydrate that, which is not much more than putting it into some warm water for 10 minutes and adding a little bit of nutrient. What I generally reach for is the White Labs Pure Pitch packets. These are easy. You just sanitize your scissors, cut the package open, dump it into your 5-gallon bucket. After that, we're going to take this bucket and we're just going to give it a little slosh. And what that does is it adds oxygen. Adding oxygen before fermentation gives your yeast the nutrients they need to grow and to reproduce. The next big thing that you need to moderate as a homebrew cider maker, and one of the hardest things, is keeping a constant temperature. Each of these packets says on the bottom what your range of temperature needs to be. If it needs to be at 70, you can stay from 68 to 72 and still have a perfect fermentation. Depending on the temperature that you're fermenting at and the nutrients available, fermentation will take anywhere from 3 weeks to a month and a half to complete. So after fermentation, you need to do what's called racking. Racking is simply getting your cider off of the lees or dead yeast. To do this, you need a racking cane, and what I like to use to sanitize is a spray bottle full of alcohol. You need to sanitize your racking cane first, and the tube, and then put it in your cider. You're then going to hold it and pump it until cider comes out the tube. This goes into your clean secondary fermentation vessel. So after you've completed racking, you're going to do what's called cold crashing. Cold crashing is putting your fermentation vessel into a cold place so all the heavy sediment falls out of solution. And what this does is it clarifies your cider. So after you've racked and cold crashed a few times and you have a clear cider that you're happy with, or a hazier cider, that's just fine, we're going to brand and back sweeten if you're not producing a dry. Today we're going to be making a citrus cider. So we have our orange peel and we're going to add that right to the cider. To do this successfully, you need a funnel that's sanitized, and we're just going to weigh it out. I already have this pre-weighed, so I know exactly how much, and we're just going to add it right to the cider. After that's added, you're going to put your airlock back on, put this back in your fridge or wherever you had it sitting, and we're going to let it sit until you get the desired flavor. After we've added our orange peel, we've let it sit and we like the flavor, we're going to stabilize our cider. And to do that we need two chemicals, potassium sorbate and potassium metabisulfite, or KMBS for short. Potassium sorbate helps stop fermentation from happening again, and potassium metabisulfite helps stop bacterial spoilage as well as a small amount of oxygenation. If you're wondering whether to stabilize your product, think of whether it's dry or if it's sweet. If it's bone dry, there should be no fermentable sugars in the solution, and you should be okay to not add stabilizers, but it's always a good idea to add them. If your product is sweet, you're almost always going to want to add stabilizers. So after branding, we're going to carbonate and package our cider. The easiest way is forced carbonation, and to complete that, you would buy one of these Corny kegs or Cornelius kegs and a small CO2 canister. You would fill this with your cider, pressurize it, and shake it, and you would repeat the process until you feel that it has an adequate amount of CO2 in the solution. The second way to carbonate your cider is called bottle conditioning. So just before fermentation is complete, you're going to rack directly into your package. To do that, you need a racking cane and a bottle filler. This bottle filler plugs directly into your tubing and it goes directly into the bottle just like that. You fill the bottle with your cider and then you add what's called priming sugar. What priming sugar does is it gives yeast enough nutrient to restart fermentation. You need to weigh this out and determine what you want your carbonation to be before adding the priming sugar, or else you'll blow up your bottles. Once your priming sugar is added, you're going to close the top of the bottle. I like to use swing tops. They're just a little easier to use. Or you can use a crown or a bottle cap and your crowner. Simply goes on top and you crimp it down. And those are pretty much the steps of making your own hard cider. If you have any suggestions of what we should talk about next time, comment down below. Good luck and cheers.